All right, today we're going to be talking about synchronicity, what it is, what it's not, and how it works. So we start off though with confirmation bias, because this is usually the label that is used the most to discredit the idea, the concept of genuine synchronicity. But first, we'll define synchronicity just to make sure we're all on the same page. Synchronicity, the meaningful coincidences that can't be rationally explained, or the notable correlations that, for whatever reason, can't be rationally explained in our everyday life. Common example is you're thinking of somebody and they call you. Or you're dreaming of something, an event happening, and it happens in real life externally. Or you're thinking about something and then that character from a TV show pops up on a billboard or something, or pops up on the TV show, but TV screen, but it's maybe not part of that show, right? So just things where like, hey, that doesn't make sense. But the way that we think about reality in this linear, constrained linear time fashion, we think, okay, well, A leads to B. That doesn't make sense that I would think of somebody and they call me. How did that happen? And so what most people use to explain that is confirmation bias, okay? Which is defined as the human tendency to favor information that aligns with one's beliefs. Okay, you're just noticing it, this meaningful coincidence, because you already thought it was meaningful. You're just adding meaning to it. There's no meaning inherent in that synchronistic event, that coincidence, that correlation, or it's just a coincidence. But we need to understand, though, about confirmation bias, is that this is just an empirical label that is itself confirmation bias. It assumes that there is an objective alternative, meaning there is a place outside of confirmation bias, or there is a place outside of our subjective experience that people are operating from, as if not every aspect of distinct finite existence as anything has bias in it. All experiments have confirmation bias. Even the experiment that apparently, validated, confirmed that confirmation bias was a thing, would be subject to confirmation bias under the terms that they have defined confirmation bias to be. Because you have an experimenter who had a belief that said, hey, I have a hypothesis. I hypothesize that, posit that, people will favor information that already aligns with their inherent beliefs or their current beliefs at this time. And then they ran an experiment, cutting out different variables that intentionally, to control the experiment, they're cutting out variables that they think, that they personally believe are not relevant, and then focusing on labels or variables that they believe are relevant. This is all filtering through their own individual bias. Every experiment is being filtered through our subjective bias, because human beings are finite creatures, like all things that we see and experience in the world, which means that they're inherently biased, because to be biased is to be finite, is to be directed, is to be oriented in one position as opposed to another. So life itself is biased. Everything that is alive, everything that you see in front of you is biased in a certain way, is directed in a certain way, because it is that thing and not another thing. And moving even forward with the confirmation bias, which would be riddled in all experiments, and yet we like to believe that all these scientific discoveries are just inherently certain and factual, even though they're subject to the very thing that apparently human beings suffer from on a universal scale, which is confirmation bias. You control for variables, like I just said, but that is just more bias. You have the whole concept of internal validity versus external validity, where internal validity is controlling an experiment so you can get a certain result or get certain clean results without having confounding variables, other things in the way, bleeding through the results. But by doing that, you directly, inversely, lower the external validity, meaning the more that you control or bias an experiment to measure certain variables, the less it is applicable to the external world, because the external world is full of confounding variables. That's just the natural state of things, of reality. And then the question must arise, which is, when does confirmation bias stop being genuine pattern recognition? Synchronicity, are you recognizing a genuine pattern, a genuine correlation, or is it just confirmation bias and illusory pattern recognition? That's just a subject of your evolutionary programming. But the thing is, there's no hard ontological line. There's no definitive line where we can say, this is genuine real pattern recognition, and this is just confirmation bias or just delusion. That is subjective. That line, wherever you put that line, even through empirical evidence or experiments, is subjective and subject to what scientists would call confirmation bias. So it's kind of like this self-refuting, snake eating its own tail situation going on here with confirmation bias to discredit synchronicity as this actually meaningful thing, right? But I'm even going to use science to support the concept of synchronicity, because why not? So in quantum mechanics or particle physics, we have this concept called entanglement particles, spooky action at a distance. You probably heard of it. And what this does is it defies the standard causal chains, spatial separation and temporal ordering, linear time and space, that science operates on to talk about correlation or to posit causation. What we must understand is that this actually supports the concept, the idea that everything is one substance, one thing, because you have these two entangled particles that are perfectly synced up. They could be light years away, and they are instantaneously, simultaneously synced up across space and time, and it defies what we would consider possible. Because based off Bell's theorem, we know for a fact there's no hidden variables in three-dimensional space and time. In 3D space and time, I have to specifically, no hidden variables. And also, there's no information being transferred between the two, because that would defy the speed of light, the laws of physics. Things can't propagate faster through space and time, what we perceive as space and time, than the speed of light. So things can sync up without 3D causal mechanism, meaning that you don't need information transfers for something to be correlated in a meaningful way, to be entangled. Two people can be synced up without having to have this three-dimensional causal chain, right? You can think of a person and they could be thinking of you at the same time. And that means that you might be accessing something transcendent outside of three-dimensional space and time, or two people can have the same idea around the same time. That actually happens a lot in history. Like even with evolution, Darwinism, there was another man that actually had the same idea, the same concept at the same time. A lot of discoveries, they're usually with somebody else who just didn't get there quick enough to get their name in the history books. Or there's a reason why the person who's in the history books is in the history books and not the other person who discovered the same thing at a similar time. But that's a whole other rabbit hole that we do not have to get into. So what this is showing us is that space-time gravity is not fundamental. Synced up to the same source that transcends space-time, meaning that synchronicity is woo-woo, not possible, just confirmation bias, delusion, if you believe that linear space-time is fundamental. Because you're thinking, hey, there's no way that there's no way for the mechanism for your friend to know that you were thinking of them, so therefore it's just you noticing, it doesn't mean anything. But again, that assumes that perhaps you were accessing a higher realm of reality, and then as you thought of your friend thought of you. There's been countless times where I'm thinking of somebody and then they've DM'd me, or I see a text from them, or they call me. After long stretches of not talking to them. Even today, my best friend who hadn't replied to me in like a week, I was thinking of him. I was like, hey man, this motherfucker hasn't called me in a week or texted me in a week. What the fuck? It's been a while. Today, like right before I made this video, to just kind of give me a nice little wink from the universe, which is also myself, which is all of us. We're all the universe. We're all God in our own way. So now we're going to focus on synchronicity. Thank you for your patience. So it's not mystical. It's not magical. It's not just mere coincidence. It is correlational with mechanism that is transcendent to space and time, three-dimensional space and time, to what we can experience with our senses. There's something else going on. Correlation is not causation is a false assumption. This is the usual other defense. Oh, well, it's correlation, it's not causation. Doesn't mean that there's a causal chain happening. But again, causation is, David Hume already poked through this, and I have a whole video on causation is a myth. Causation isn't real. It's all correlation. What we call causation is just high probability correlation, usually involving an intervention. Okay? But everything's correlation. Nothing is truly certain. Everything's probabilistic. So it's all correlational at the end of the day, fundamentally, at least. And again, where you draw the line of when you start saying this is causation and this is correlation is subjective, subject to confirmation bias or just bias in general. We're all biased. If you're a finite being in an infinite universe creation, you're biased. To exist, you have to be biased because you are this and not that to exist at all. So the way that synchronicity works is the principle of as above, so below. Because everything is one substance, one conscious substance, all aspects of existence are intertwined, intermingled, interdependent. And when you experience synchronicity, you are noticing the meaningful correlations of the cosmos that is happening all the time. There was always things happening that you can notice and find meaning in. And it's not you projecting meaning onto the cosmos or the universe, because that would mean that you are separate from the universe, and that is dualism, and that is illogical. It's all one thing, one substance. It makes the most logical, rational sense. So if we're all the same thing, if we're all one ocean, just in different configurations and modes, interacting with other aspects of the same ocean, the same substance, then correlation makes a lot more sense. Because that means that we're all synced up. And when you have that moment of synchronicity, you are becoming more aware of the workings and the interdependent nature of the universe that's always been there. And it only seems weird or nonsensical or confirmation bias or illogical, not real, just pattern recognition for survival, whatever the latest explanation is from evolutionary scientists and whatever it may be, physicists. What's really happening is that you're noticing how everything's connected. And your awareness is expanding once you notice those synchronistic moments. And as your awareness expands, you will notice that synchronicity comes more and more into your life. You might see more angel numbers. You might have more meaningful coincidences. You might start to hear one thing and then you go somewhere else and that confirms that one thing. That happens to me all the time. I'll learn something and I'll say, is that real? Is that legit? And then I'll go somewhere else and somebody else I respect or some other source that I believe in will say the same thing. And I'm like, oh, that lines up. They're connected because it's all one cohesive, interdependent tapestry web that we're existing in. And synchronicity is just the process of noticing that, becoming aware of it. You become aware of the patterns that are always happening, the meaningful patterns in your life, and the meaning is intrinsic to these synchronistic events. Everything has meaning, everything is connected, and synchronicity is just our moments of noticing.